I think recording is good and a little
Yeah,
crazy too.
there we go. All right, so this will be one-on-one, at least for the time being. Hopefully someone else comes along.
Yeah.
So today, as I said, we're going to talk about life in the workplace. So, no, my controls are gone. What have you done? There we go. Okay, so we're going to talk about agile versus waterfall development environments, Jira, the developmental work tracking software, daily stand-ups, the day-to-day work life, and what to expect when you actually start working. So first of all, agile versus waterfall. 99% of all companies use one of these two systems, and the 1% are liars. They will say, well, we actually use a different system, and it's usually just waterfall or agile with extra steps. They're trying to be unique, and instead they're just making things less convenient for everyone involved. So agile work is divided into sprints, and they range typically 2 weeks, but there are also month-long sprints in some areas, but on average, you can expect a 2 week long sprint, and people will work together to decide in their department how much work can be accomplished in that 2 week set of time. Certain assignments will be put into it, and that is the work where everyone agrees on can be done within the course of their sprint. So all the work has a time limit attached to it, and you have to be in frequent and hopefully well communicated with your management, because they're the ones that are actually creating the work in Jira for you to do. And if you're not communicating very well with your management, or your manager's just not very good at communicating, then there's going to be a lot of panic at the end of sprints because too much work was put into it, and now we have to explain why there's all this carryover, which never looks good for the department. And of course, being the dev, the manager will pass the buck on you, saying it's your fault. So what can you do? But when you have a good, well-working agile environment, it can be a blessing, because there's a set amount of work that you have to do in this 2 week period. And once it's done, you can feel free to just relax.
That's
So
so interesting because I do hear that a lot with some people where they're like, this is what we have to do and we got it done on time. So today we're in the office, but we're like catching
yeah.
up, we're having other stuff because they really didn't have anything else to do.
Yep, that happens. Those are agile environments, and that's my preferred environment. But again, it's one of those things where when it works well, it works really well. But when it's poorly done, it's absolute hell. So you just kind of got to gauge how things are going in your department to find out if it's a well-working or a poorly managed agile environment. Whereas waterfall work just comes in as it is received, and I would say pretty much all like help desk and IT department the environments are waterfall. Support tickets comes in and they just handle them as they come. And this leads to the fact that work is never done. Work can pop back up at any moment. So you could be packing your stuff to go home at 4:50. Something will come in at 4:51. You go like, well, shit, now I gotta work on this. And so there's never that feeling of that weight being off your shoulder. There's always just this kind of like watching and knowing that's going to happen at any moment. Anyone who's ever worked at customer service knows this experience where it's slow at the moment, but you can never say it out loud because that's going to summon all of them immediately, and the person who does so is going to get flack from the rest of the group for the rest of time, as they well deserve. But on the upside, you almost never have to talk to management, because it is probably the least managed environment in all of history. Anytime you see something like on The Office or any kind of like workplace comedy where the manager is completely incompetent, doesn't do anything, that's a waterfall environment, because they literally have nothing to do. They're just here to like, oh, any updates on this? Okay, they are the middleman. So even a poorly managed waterfall environment runs pretty well. So a poor waterfall is always better than a poor agile, and not in all circumstances, because you don't really have to care what the manager thinks.
So does that mean that the work in a waterfall environment is easier than the work in an agile environment?
No, the work can be exactly the same. It's just how it's managed. So again, work comes in waterfall just as it comes in. So clients will say they want this functionality or they're reporting on this bug, and you just work on it as soon as it comes in and as soon as it comes up in the queue. It's just it's sitting at the butcher and taking a number and waiting for that number to be called. That's all that work is. Whereas with Agile, the work will be submitted, your manager will look it over, decide where they can fit it in, or at least like what core they can fit it in, and then they meet with the team and they decide which sprint we can fit these stories into. So the work will still sit in the queue, but it's decided on as a team when and how to work on it. Someone else is joining, I'll give them a moment. Let them connect. Hey there, Micah. Micah, you're on mute if you're talking.
Hey.
There he is. It's beginning to wonder if this is going to be a one-on-one. All right. So I was just going over Agile versus Waterfall, which are you familiar with these two terms? I don't mind repeating myself, but
No.
you're not. Okay. So Beasia, I'm sorry, I'm gonna backtrack a little
Okay,
bit.
wait,
Hope you
wait.
don't mind.
Marcus, before you do that, I forgot that you were doing this today, and I actually needed help with assignment 1 or 2, which I know you aren't doing right now. So, I will have to. Yeah, I'll
Yeah,
watch.
we could talk about this after.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I certainly don't mind.
Mhm.
But anyway, so Agile, are you staying from a session or were you just asking about assignment 2 before I started? doing myself?
Unfortunately, I don't have enough time. I just
okay.
had like a quick emergency question about assignment 2, but I'll
Okay.
make sure to watch the recording.
All right, sounds good. I'll ping you when I'm done and we can meet up after.
Okay, thanks, Marcus. Have a great day. Have a good
You
day.
too, Micah.
You
Bye-bye.
too.
Okay, so any more questions on Agile versus Waterfall before I move on?
No.
Okay. Next up, Jira. So as I said, Jira is the software most companies will use to manage work in progress. And the reason is that it sorts everything out in where it is in the dev lifecycle, and it can be used to keep track of comments that the devs are making, the requirements that the client requires, as well as what environmental information we need, such as epic links or like which environment this is specific to, if applicable. And an epic link is just a link to documentation saying what this is in relation to. So it could be just a functionality update. It could be an update to how it looks or implementing a new feature. These are epic links.
Okay.
So looking at
it's the it's like the Slack version of like the development like group sort of thing.
well, it's not a live chat. This is more like the Instagram of the workplace. So here we have a storyboard, and stories are literally work requests. So tickets that are submitted by the client, work that they need to be done. Everything is given a number for us to refer to, and then the title of the request. And when you click on it, it will open all the details relating to that request. And you'll see that, and there are multiple categories this can be put into, and they vary from company to company, but in general, it's to do, which means that we need to do it, but we haven't started on it yet. Content creation, it's in progress. Content validation, this is typically the peer review stage where you hand over your work to the rest of your department for them to look at, and then everyone else says, oh, okay, yeah, this looks good, I don't see any problems with it. Peer review is one of the more lengthy processes behind the dev cycle because you don't work in a vacuum. Everything you do affects everything else in the application or the department or wherever you're working on affects everything else. So everyone gets involved and make sure that your code is going to break something else or going to interfere with something else that's currently in progress.
Yeah.
So that's the content validation. And then in design, I'm not really sure what they're referring to here, but typically there's the development, the peer review, the QA testing, and then the staging, which is where it sits and wait for it to be deployed to production. And then we have the go live, which is the deployment to production. Pardon me. And then done, which is self-explanatory. Any questions on the layout of the storyboard?
No, I mean, that's kind of cool. I mean, it looks like you can see exactly where. So do things move from like right to left then? Like
Yeah, everything moves left to right.
I mean, left
And-
to right, yeah.
Yeah, I knew what you meant, don't worry. And the layout of the storyboard will vary from company to company. Sometimes there will be different columns for the person, and then they'll have their own like to-do process along the way. Sometimes they just put it all in the same department, and you just look up to down, and you can see the different profile pictures of the people that are working on it. This is how my company does it, what you see on the screen. This is not from my company for obvious reasons. I can't be posting screenshots of that stuff, but this is a decent example. And regardless of what layout and terminology they use, it'll follow this blueprint.
Okay, yeah.
And next up, we have the story itself. And again, the story is the work request. So, and again, the layout of this can vary from company to company, but in general, you have the story number for reference, the title of the request, the type of request. So story is just a work request, like this is dev work we need to be done. There can also be bugs. You know, this was done like a month ago, but we noticed this bug related to it. We need this to be fixed. The priority of the item, which will typically be handled by management because according to clients, everything is the highest priority.
Yeah.
Yeah, that never changes. And then the status is where it is in the dev lifecycle. Maybe it's in development or peer review, testing. This is what you will set to. So when you pick it up, you will change that to working, and then when it's in peer review, you'll set it to peer review and so forth. You are the one responsible for moving it along the line. It doesn't do it automatically.
Okay.
And then the person who filled out the report, typically your manager, is the one that will do that. And then the assignee is the person working on it. So everything is well documented, who did it, who made the story, who wrote the requirements, all these things are well documented. Oh, that was the wrong button, don't mind me. And then of course for description, this will typically be this will be the request as the client put it, and then there will be a series of acceptance criteria labeled in the company standard way. So it'll say like, okay, this is what the client is asking for word for word, and then this is the step-by-step what your code should accomplish.
Okay.
And then any attachments will go right here. This will typically be like a testing document because the people who test your code is a different department from the people who write it. So they may not actually be familiar with at all what you're doing or even what this particular app does. So you have to write this lengthy testing document. And the way I tell everybody about testing documents is that you have to write them as if you're writing them for a 103-year-old grandmother who's never touched a computer. Like it has to be
Right.
so precise.
Is that like related to what we're doing now with testing? Like, is that what you're talking about?
Not quite. So that's automated testing, what we're doing in unit testing. So that's code that's testing itself. But this is human testing, and so we're not writing JavaScript testing. We're writing a series of tests for the tester to take. So it'll be like, go to Facebook, open up Mozilla Firefox, go to facebook.com, log in with this email and this password, click this item on Facebook, and this should appear.
Okay. So it's like troubleshooting.
Yeah, well, it's not even troubleshooting. It's literally a step-by-step guide telling the tester what they need to do, exactly how to do it, and what the result is going to be.
Okay.
And then they know if they got something else, then they know that there's something wrong with your code or something didn't migrate over properly. And then issue links. So this will be 99% of the time, issue links are for bugs, so that if there's a bug with something that was done a month ago, you can see the original story that was related to it. So you can see what was done and kind of build off it. And that way you don't have to do this reverse engineering on code that you've never worked on before, because you have the original story, you already know what was done. And then comments, again, self-explanatory. Any comments from management or from the developer himself. Typically the developer will put in a brief summary of the changes they made in the comments below. But again, different companies will have different requirements. Any questions on the story anatomy?
No, I'm really liking the structure of it. Like it's really clear cut.
It's really nice. And again, Jira can be a beautiful thing or it can be a terrible thing depending on how clearly your manager writes things. But you know, what can you do? All right.
How long have you been writing code? Like professionally?
Like in terms of like how long have I been getting paid for it?
Yes.
About 6 months.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay. So then when it gets time to questions, I have questions about your job.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of this is in general, because I can't get too specific for obvious reasons, because everything is so
Right,
different.
yeah.
And B, it's also from my own perspective. The Jira seems to be the most common tool, but I'm sure there are others.
Yeah.
Moving right along, we have daily stand-up, and this is typically done in the mornings. First thing, you'll log in to your client VPN, or you'll walk into a meeting room in the office where everyone talks about one by one what they did yesterday and what they're going to be doing today. So spotlight gets to be on you for a while, especially if something has gone wrong with something you're working on. You have to explain to the entire department why it has gone wrong.
So when you say department, you don't mean like, I don't know, sometimes when I hear coders talk, I get this idea that there are, groups of like, 6 to 8, maybe 6 to 10 people that are in your group. Is that what you're talking about? When you
It
say
can be.
department?
It can be, departments vary in size and scope, but you could think of Launch Code as a company. And then my group, the Marcus and Pan group, that's a department in Launch Code, and that has like 16-ish students. So you could say that that's 16 employees with Pan and I as the managers. And then however many people are in your group is your department, and then you have your 2 TAs, which would be your managers. Same
Okay,
thing,
so it
and the
is a
numbers
little
vary.
bit more, but it's the same concept, yeah.
Exact same concept. And again, department sizes can be bigger or smaller. Like my department that I just moved to is only like 6 people, but there are other departments that have like 10 people. And it really just depends on what that department is responsible for and how much work comes their way. But yeah, stand up, you literally you talk to the department head about what you did yesterday and what you're going to be doing today. Which hopefully goes smoothly. But again, there are those times where things have not gone smoothly, then you have to explain why, or God forbid that you're stumped, which is like the most anxiety inducing thing on the planet. You have to make it sound like you know what you're doing, even though you have no idea what you're doing.
Jeez.
There will be those days. Yeah. Yeah, I have them too. And then now we're going to go on to the day to day. Everyone loves the day-to-day life cycle. So
it's true. It's what we all are trying to figure out. So yeah.
And I've summed it up in these 2 GIFs quite nicely. I think this sums up very, very well. So everyone thinks I'm at the computer all day, which I am, but I'm not always working all day. And work varies. And it varies based on how much work is coming my way. Because again, I'm in an agile environment. So if all the work is done for a sprint, I'm not doing anything. And not to mention, if I'm waiting on a peer review, company rules vary, but in my company, someone can't take on more than 2 stories at a time before something is labeled as done, and then you can take on something else. So if both my stories are in peer review or in testing, I can't do anything about it. I'm literally just waiting. So
is that process usually like a quick turn? It seems like the testers then, or the peer reviewers, they seem to have a lot of pressure because they have to get that back pretty quick, right?
Not really. You would think so, but I've seen peer review take more than a day.
Oh, really?
Okay. But again, it's not my fault. I've handed it off, and at this point, it's literally out of my hands. So there's pressure on them. There's no pressure on me. I did my part.
Right.
So
yeah,
it can be annoying at the end of a sprint where I'm trying to get these things done so that they're not carrying over. And if the work on something is done and the sprint is coming to an end, it's not usually a big deal because you're just saying like, oh, well, the testing isn't complete. So it's going to carry over to the next sprint, but it's going to be moved right away. But if something is wrong with it and testing finds something on at the end of the sprint, it's literally the worst thing on the planet because you have almost no time to fix it. Yeah. So, and of course now testing is complete, and now the buck is back to you, and now it's your fault. So but again, these things happen too, but they're the exception, not the rule.
So are you in an environment where you have to, are you virtual? Are you hybrid?
I'm virtual. I am all virtual all the time.
So I have a question about that.
Yeah.
Clark said that we should probably expect to return to work, which makes sense. But the more and more people that give these like presentations and that talk to us, they talk a lot about virtual. Only one of the ladies in the last 3 presentations I've had from tutors or from people that have come back to talk about Launch Code have said that they're in a hybrid environment. So is hybrid less common? You either go in or you don't, and is virtual, I mean, of course, COVID has made virtual probably more common than normal, but like, are you the only virtual? Is your department virtual or is your whole company virtual?
Not the whole company, because we're a big company and we're in multiple states, but
Oh.
for the St. Louis base part of my company, we're all virtual. And I would say hybrid is pretty common because I know a lot of people that only go in once or twice a week, and then the rest of it is all virtual. And a lot of the reason is that now that we have this whole system in place to be virtual, it makes a lot of sense to be virtual because now, you know, even if you're sick, you can still work, and there's no more tardiness because of traffic or snow or whatever kind of inclement weather. You don't have to pay as much for space and cleaning that space. I think that we're going to see a lot more transition into virtual as time goes on, but that's
So-
just kind of my opinion.
So then I have another question, like, and I don't know if you can maybe answer it or if you care to answer it right now, but I'm curious about, like, my daughter, she works for a medical call center and she works from home. And I was trying to gauge like how they deal with productivity, and in her environment, they like have something on the computer that logs when you're on and off sort of thing. Is that pretty standard? Like,
And the reason for that is because all the work that you're doing is protected. And so there's a high level of security. You can't be using you can't be using your own computer, which could have all these vulnerabilities. Your
oh,
computer.
you don't have your own, you don't use your own computer?
No, I have a work laptop and I have to use that. Everything is super protected. I have to connect to their VPN services and their firewalls. Everything that comes in or out of my computer has to go through the IT department. It's super.
Okay,
Yeah, it is super protected.
okay, that's good to know. And that makes sense, I guess, with companies, because everybody has random computers and you don't know what their level of like protection is on their computer.
Mhm.
I'm trying to think if I have any other questions that people might be thinking about. Like the main thing, I think for me and a couple of the people I talked to is kind of like the environment. And it does seem like coding is a very flexible environment. I mean, which is really cool. It doesn't seem like there's any pushback coming from that. I don't know. I guess since I'm a teacher, in my head, I think like even now during COVID, people are angry when teachers work from home because they think, well, you should be working at school because you're not really working if you're working at home. So there's this like stigma attached to working at home, and it just doesn't seem to be the same in the tech industry.
Yeah, I think virtual will become the norm at some point, but we're still kind of in that weird transitional phase where a lot of the older companies want to bring back people into the office because they're just used to that and they don't want things to change that quickly. But I think as time goes on, we're going to see a lot more companies starting up that'll be completely virtual. They won't even get office space. They'll literally just be this dude in his garage with a whole bunch of servers. But we'll see. Only time will tell. But I'm loving being all virtual. All right. Hello, Hannah. How are you?
Hi.
I was answering a couple of questions. I don't know exactly when you joined or.
I just came in like, I don't know, 3 minutes ago.
Oh, okay. Great. So I
Hi,
was.
Asia. Hi, Asia.
Hi, Hannah.
You're from her group. Excellent. Okay, and this is being recorded, so don't worry about anything you missed. All
Okay.
right, let's go ahead and move on to something that surprises a lot of people, and that is the coding interview will be significantly harder than the job will be. And the reason that coding interviews can be so difficult is because they want to know what your limits are. So don't worry when you can't answer questions. There will be, you'll have your normal questions like, oh, how would you write a function? And easy, I can write a function. And then they'll ask, what is the difference between the curly tilde line versus the up arrow in a sem inverse server syntax, such as that used in the npm package.json file? Yeah, exactly. And I'm not making that up. That is a real thing, and I don't even think the book gets into that at some point. So don't worry if you don't even know if that sounds like voodoo. But, there will be completely off the wall questions like that, typically toward the end, where you don't even know how to approach it. And of course, you're in a live interview with your camera on, so you don't have the time to Google it. And even if you could, what the hell are you going to search for with the question I just asked? It's probably gonna start with what is assembler syntax, but
So was that how your interview went? Was it was it a digital interview?
yeah. So mine was over a Zoom call, much like this one, and there was the company head, and then there was the senior dev, and then there was another guy from, I forget which department, but the high up guy. And they asked me a whole bunch of questions about, my time in launch code and other coding camps that I had done, as well as personal projects I had submitted. And then they asked me, coding questions. And I don't remember the brain breaking question they asked me, because it was just like so off the wall. I didn't even know where the hell to go with it. But I remember the one I remember most distinctly was that they asked me what a null pointer exception was, which I knew the answer, but my brain just completely died at that moment. I was just like, you know what? I know the answer, but it's just not coming to me at the moment. And that's something really important, is to always admit when you don't know something, but always provide the next step. Like, I don't know what this is right now, or I know the answer, but it's just not coming to me I'm having one of those moments. You're just trying to talk and a bird's flying your lip. These things happen. But it's okay not to know something, as long as you're providing the next step. Like, I would start by searching on Stack Overflow via Google, try to find some decent examples of what this terminology might be, and then look for some examples on the implementation online, so that I can find some decent standards to draw some inspiration from. These things are important, because the reason that they're asking you these seemingly impossible questions is to determine how you work under the pressure of not knowing how to do something when you're being asked to do it. And keeping your head and listing steps you would go to accomplish it is half the battle.
Did you have to do another one of the tests that we had to do to get into launch code? We had to do like
I
the hour test?
didn't for this particular company, but there have been coding interviews where I have had to do that.
So it's like a 90-minute, or you have like an hour to do these like 4 problems sort of thing. And
Yep, that will happen. But then you'll sink into the job and you're just like, make a field with a checkbox on it. Okay, done. Okay, I'll take my 8 hours pay now.
I'll take my 8 hours pay now.
I have had days like that, and those days are lovely. Again, they're the exception, not the rule, but when they happen, enjoy them.
So since you said that you work in an agile environment where your boss like assigns how long a task should be.
Well, it's not how long the tasks should be, because remember, the agile environments, they work in sprints, which are typically 2 weeks long. And so as we decide as a team how much work can be done in that 2 weeks. So it's not an individual task that we're deciding on how long it will take. It's how many tasks we can do in this 2-week period.
Okay, so when in that kind of environment, do you find that like bosses and things like tend to adjust when they see, because like I think about like teaching right now, there's a sub shortage in America. So some school districts have responded by giving subs higher pay. Some districts have responded by saying, teachers, you have to give up your plan time and sub. And if one of those works, they just keep doing it. So I guess I'm trying to ask about like company happenings. Like if your boss, and you said that you've only worked there for 6 months, so you haven't maybe worked long enough to see, but like, do you find that if there was an accidental assignage of more work than can be done, does that get adjusted? Or is that
Absolutely does. And we take into account things that may have happened, because sometimes projects wind up being much bigger than what we previously thought. We might uncover some linked to a whole different object that we didn't know that these two actually spoke to one another, and the workload increases. These things happen. These are all things we take into account. But in the instance, if the manager is worth a damn, then if we realize that we have put too much work for ourselves, we'll scale it back. But that's why the team effort is so important, because we decide, again, in an ideal agile environment, we decide as a team how much work we can get done. And you kind of sell into a rhythm once you've been around for a few of them. You kind of realize like, oh, okay, we can get this done, this done, this done. This one is probably going to take an entire week in of itself, which is going to draw a lot of attention. These things happen, but again, that's why I emphasize communication so much when I was talking about agile, because everyone has to be in talks with one another. Otherwise, if you all work in vacuums, we're not going to have an idea of what the capacity really is.
Yeah.
Which leads me to my next point. Balancing the workload. If you don't burn yourself out on trying to burn down all this work all at once, because once you have set a pace, it's up to you to maintain that pace. And if you are just stressing yourself out for sprint 1, sprint 2, sprint 3, you're going to stress yourself out for every sprint, because you've set that standard in the company eyes. And now when you finally have to scale it back because you can't do it anymore, they're going to be like, oh, well, why have you slowed down? What's going on? You used to do like 8 tickets a sprint. Now you're down to 4. What's going on? That's a drastic drop. And it doesn't look very good. So you kind of have to find this balance where you're not doing the least, but you also don't want to be the one doing the most. Especially because pretty much everyone in the department is probably getting paid the same. So don't go doing more than everyone else for the same pay. And not to mention everyone else in the department is not going to thank you for getting more done, because that puts more pressure on them. So yeah, as you join the company, especially one that's been around for a while and everyone's already kind of settled in a rhythm, you get a feel for how much is a good amount to do without A, looking like you're dragging behind, or B, leaving everyone else in the dust. So be kind
That's
to
good to know.
be
Yeah.
kind to your coworkers. Don't be a Hermione in the workplace. Nobody wants that.
Okay.
Yeah, and you won't thank yourself for it either, because you're really just making it harder for yourself, and it has to be. All right. Next point. How many meetings is too many? Good Lord, there could be a lot of meetings in the course of a week. And again, every company will be different, but my working hours are from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. And there will be days where I'll only have meetings from 8 until 12. And then there will be other days where I'll have meetings from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. It's like, well, what the hell work you want me to get done? So again, in an agile environment with a manager who's worth a damn, you all be able to work this out as a team to what is an acceptable amount of meetings, and when there's a go, no go for meetings. Where it's like, listen, if you want me to get anything done, I have to have time to sit down and work it. I can't do a start stop thing. Otherwise, I'm not going to gain any momentum. But I got to spend the first half of that hour rereading what I just did, so I can put myself back in the mindset. And then I get like half an hour of actual coding done. And then it's time for another meeting. I'm going to lose my shit, and you're not going to see any progress on my end. And I'm just not going to pay attention to the meetings, because now I have to work through my meetings, which means you're not getting input from me, which means this meeting could have been an email. And nobody wants to be in the meeting that could have been an email. I underline nobody. So Agile will be much more receptive, typically, again, if their manager is worth a damn, to meeting schedules, because certain meetings have to happen. You have to have your daily stand-up. There has to be sessions where we talk about stories coming into future sprints and how much effort we think will be involved, so we can plan going forward. These meetings have to happen, but we have to handle the time responsibly. It is a limited resource.
Wow. So I mean, and this isn't yours, but so
No.
is it typical to maybe, I'm looking at the meetings and there's like a lot of different.
I purposely looked up.
Groups.
I purposely looked up a full meeting calendar example on Google, but I have had weeks like this.
Wow.
Particularly around the holidays when everyone's out on PTO and I'm the only one in the office. Oy vey. But yeah, again, it varies from company to company. Communicate with your manager about when is not effective to have a meeting.
So were you in a position when you got hired to deny that job if you didn't like the environment? And I only ask that because a few people that have been speakers, like there's this worldwide tech company that Clark had us like go to, and I listened to their thing, and they talked a lot about just, having an amazing work environment. And then they would say things like, if this company asks you to do this, then don't take that job. That's a bad company. Like if this
Mhm.
company asks you to work more than 40 hours a week, don't take that job. That's a bad company. Like, were you in a position? I feel like maybe I won't be in a position to not take a job that's offered, but
Companies only have as much power over your position as you give them. There's always another job, especially in this day and age where things are remote. I could be working for a company in New York or England or Japan. I have access to the entire world via remote work. There is another job. Saying that you have to settle for this job is like saying you have to settle for this relationship, even though there's plenty of fish in the sea. Yeah, she punches me in the eye every now and then. She broke my favorite vase, but this is probably as good as it's gonna get, right? Don't settle for less. You don't get your time back for working at a bad company. The Grim Reaper doesn't come by when you're 90 years old and they're like, hey, I was gonna take you today, but you were at that shitty Connection company for 8 months. Here's a coupon. It's on me. So go find
so
another.
then I
go
have
find another
one more.
company.
I have
Yeah.
one more question then. Sorry, I'm just full of questions, but
That's fine.
I'm curious about like in the education field or in some other fields, when you leave, there's like a lot of like negativity and it takes a long time. It seems like if you can always leave another job, it's never a good thing to not stay at a job for a certain amount of time. But is that different in the tech world?
It can be the same. And again, it depends on the company. If obviously there will be times when you're leaving a company that's already short staffed, but they have just as much power to leave as you do. So they're making a choice to work in this bad environment. There are certain people who chose to stay on the Titanic, but you chose to get on the lifeboat. Why are you feeling bad for them? Don't drag yourself down just because they're doing it and they're like, oh, you should suffer with us. Suffering like company. Yeah, well, I'm antisocial, so you can just deal with that. Go find a company that works for you. Don't work for a company.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That really, truly put it in perspective.
I saw your eyes get wide that example. I felt kind of bad saying it like that, so I'm glad it was a good example. I was like, oh, I made a Titanic joke. That's probably a little off the line. Oh well. All right. Next up, again on the topic of limited resources, 8 GB of RAM. Now, I normally say it varies from company to company. This is pretty much standard. They're gonna if you're working remote, they're gonna give you a work laptop with about 8 GB of RAM, which is probably enough to open up a tab in Google Chrome and maybe an email. So learning how little your computer can do at once and working around it is going to be part of your work life. And God help you when it's time to demo your work to a client, because now you have to share a screen, which is probably gonna cause your computer to crash. Has happened more than once. 8 GB of RAM does not count for anything. Yes, I know that we put people on the moon for less than that, but this, Google Chrome is going around to 7 satellites. So I actually use Microsoft Edge just because it uses half the RAM of Chrome and I actually free up some room.
Wow, that's good to know because I am a Chrome person, but
Yeah. I'm more for Firefox. I just like their layout a little better, but they both eat RAM like nobody's business. But it's bad when you're using Internet Explorer. So, I know they call it Edge now. You can't fool me. I see past the lies. All right. And then another thing that surprises a lot of people about programming is how little programming is actually involved. And so this is not an exaggeration. About 30% of your work during the week will be actual programming, and the rest of it will be all documenting the work that was done. So you have to fill out your solution design for your lead dev for him to review. You have to fill out the testing document for the QA testers to follow. You have to you have to fill out the story details that kind of fill in the gaps for the acceptance criteria that you had to modify. There's so much documentation. And if your company has other requirements, like my company has a history tracker for every single object on everything that we do. So anything I make a change of, I have to go find that particular object somewhere in the documentation and fill out exactly what I changed, what story it was related to, and why I made that change. There is so much documentation on every step of the way. So.
Do you find that that is like helpful or useful or just an obnoxious part of it?
It's definitely obnoxious, but it's important because if there's ever a bug that we have to fix, we need that documentation. Because because you can discover, a bug can be discovered about something that was worked on like 2 years ago by somebody who's not even in the company anymore. You need that documentation to reference, and it needs to be referenced everywhere. They did this, so why did they do this? Oh, it interacts with this object, and if we remove it, it causes it to crash. It helps you fix things more appropriately, because when there's a bug, we gotta get it fixed as quickly as possible. We don't have time for trial and error. We gotta find the cause and get fixed and redeploy back to production ASAP. So it's obnoxious, and I would say 90% of the time it doesn't get used, but that 10% is so detrimental if it's not there that it's worth it.
Okay.
Yeah, what do you think? Yeah, that's what he says. He says it's time to go climbing inside my shirt. Okay, and that is the end of my small presentation. So we have about 4 minutes before Zoom decides to go poof. So let's have an open Q&A. Any other questions you all have?
I have a question, but I was gonna wait to see if Hannah did, because I talk a lot, so.
I just have one question, like about this 30% coding and 70% documentation.
Mhm.
When you say documentation, is it like uploading your stuff to their GitHub and like that, or is it just?
It can be, that can be part of it. And not all companies use GitHub. Like my company uses Capado, which is very similar to GitHub, but it's not GitHub. So it will be uploading to Capado. It will be emailing my solution design, which is the steps I took to solve the problem that we were having. I email that over to the lead dev. I write out the step-by-step testing document that the QA testers have to follow to get the results that they need to be getting. And I attach that to the ticket. There's a lot of documentation involved, and how much will vary from company to company, but in general, there will always be something sent to the lead dev, something sent to the QA team, and then something to track the changes, such as GitHub or Capado.
Thank you.
I'm really curious actually about your transition from launch code to work. Like, and whether or not you came into launch code already with experience. And
I'm really glad you asked this question. So I was in a previous boot camp prior to launch code, and which was much higher stakes, really, or rather much higher stress. They were much faster moving, and they didn't cover like HTML, CSS, JavaScript, or any of that. They went straight into the hard stuff. So my brain was just breaking 100% of the time. So I already kind of had a good idea of what I was doing by the time I got into launch code, because I had done the complicated stuff already. But I hadn't done actual professional work prior to launch code. And this is gonna surprise you, but by the time we finish with unit 1, you have all the skills you need to get a job. Literally all the skills you need. And I would advise you, by the time there will be around about a week off between the end of unit 1 and the start of unit 2. I say use that time, polish up your resume, start looking.
wow.
There's no need to wait for launch code to finish to start looking for work. I didn't.
Really?
Yep.
Did you finish launch code?
I did finish launch code.
I'm curious.
I finished it more for the sake of it, because I had already had a job for a month by that point, but you know.
Wow. Do you feel like, I get that, I mean, you are a very confident person, or at least you appear to be very confident.
No comment.
Do you, did you just make the decision, like, fuck it, I'm amazing? Because I feel like I know things, but I don't feel amazing right now.
I did it because I don't like waiting for other people. You know, the worst they can do is just tell me no. And Launch Code has their own partnerships, then they're going to get me a job come hell or high water. But, you know, then I have to wait for them, because even after the end of Launch Code Unit 2, there's another week off, and then there's an 8-week liftoff program that we have to complete. So we're talking another couple of months just for that. And then their partnership program begins, and that takes however long it's going to take. So I'm just going to start looking. I see no reason not to. Like, all of the skills I need, you know, I'm not going to say I'm a guru of anything, but I could get a job as an entry-level developer, and I did.
Do you feel comfortable with your pay?
As of right now, yeah.
Okay.
Like the job I had, the Zoom is actually just about to go poof, as
Oh.
a matter of fact. Let me reopen the room and then there will be more talk. One moment.